Welcome again virtually to the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak Region for our community conversation. Today is City Council Pay. We try to do these once a quarter. Chanita Davis is on our events team, and she is the coordinator and organized today. So thank you for the events team and the League for putting this on. The League this is something we've been talking about for quite a while. I believe it's been to the voters a couple of times. I've only been here since 2018. But I do know from some research that this is something that you guys have been talking about for quite a while. So our panelists, we already mentioned Yolanda Avila. We are still having some technical difficulties on that end, so hopefully we will be able to get her in. She is a current council member and she is outgoing. She is term limited, so she will not is not running for re-election. And also current council member and council president, Mr. Randy Helms, is here with us today as one of your panelists. Former four-term council member, Mr. Richard Skorman, also here with us today. Thank you. And former council member also, Tim Leigh. So those are your panelists that are going to be joining us today and answering your questions, my questions. I had a whole bunch of them since I'm still kind of learning this process and exactly what it takes to kind of, if this is something we think the voters and even city council and our mayor are for, what does that process look like? So that's kind of why we're here today, is to talk about how much pay they get, what does that look like, and how you go about changing something that's in our charter, because that's really what it's going to take. So if you have questions along the way, the great thing is you can type those in the chat, and again, Kate will monitor that for you and get that back to our panelists. So please do that. Again, this is being recorded, so we will be on our Making Democracy Work podcast. You can find that on the League's website at lwvppr.org. I just kind of want to say thank you to our panelists again for being here today. They're going to give a 1-minute introduction, and we're going to really just kind of jump right into the discussion. Again, I want to tell you a little bit about the League real quick. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit grassroots organization. And what that means is, with regards to nonpartisan, is we do not support, endorse candidates or oppose. We do not do any type of things with candidates or political parties, but we do discuss issues. This is kind of the meat of what the League does. But a lot of people think, well, we're just about voting and voter registration, but the issues are really kind of the heart of in addition to that get out the vote effort. Of course, municipal elections, right? April 1st are your municipal elections there on your screen. Ballots are going to be due by 7 p.m. if you live in the city, obviously. And then there are some candidate forms for you as well with regards to what we have planned in educating our voters, right? So we hope if you live in a certain district, there's still some more information coming, but there's some great stuff for you. All right, our goals. We as voters, right? We elect our city council members. I don't know if everyone knows this, but I'm learning lots. They also serve on the utility board, right? So it's a double duty kind of thing. And in that capacity, they have the responsibility of governing that board. So for as much as we in the public might gripe and complain about those elected officials, we want to make sure that, again, there is significant amounts of time here, right? So past city council members say this position requires 40 to 50 hours a week. It's a full-time job plus some. Is a council member's pay indicative of how active they are? Do we exclude those that are passionate about improving our city but are unable to because they are not retired or have the financial means to do so? This pay is currently $6,250 per year. And does low pay create a higher barrier for entry for residents who can't juggle a full-time paying job plus city council, but they have a valuable perspective to bring to the table? Does that exclude those people? Those are some of the questions that we're going to get started really quick. To give you some context before our panelists give their introduction. Colorado Springs, I already told you how much they pay. We have a population of 488,664 people in the city at last count. That's an estimate. Raleigh, North Carolina, with a population of approximately 482,000. Their salary is $30,743 for their city council members. Aurora, Colorado, at 397,811 in population, has $20,063 in salary for the city council members. Omaha, Nebraska, population 483, just above Colorado Springs. Their salaries for their city council members are $121,015. And then Kansas City, Missouri, these are kind of the top 5 that I'm giving you that are right around Colorado Springs population. Kansas City, Missouri, population 510,000, just over that. Their salary is $81,538. So that just gives you some context of exactly how much the city council members are getting compared to other cities around us. So let's start with, I like going in alphabetical order. That's just kind of me. And I'm probably just going to start with Council President Randy Helms, if you wouldn't kind of just give us a 1-minute introduction, and then we'll kind of get started with questions right after that.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having this panel today to allow us to be able to describe what it's like to be on the council and really working as a volunteer. The $6,250 you mentioned is actually called a stipend, not even pay, and there's no benefits connected to it. But we can get into that later. I first arrived in Colorado Springs in the summer of 1975 as a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy. Graduated in 1979 and then went off to pilot training. Came back, I met my wife here in Colorado Springs. We were married in the cadet chapel. We came back in the late 80s so I could teach at the academy, and we actually bought a home in Colorado Springs. So it was really then in the 80s that I got a chance to see what it's like, both from a business perspective, owning a home perspective, and the things that later would drive me to want to continue to serve in the community. Retired from the United States Air Force after 30 years, and we knew we wanted to come back. So we came back in 2015. I wanted to get involved in our community here to continue my service. And I happen to know previous council members who had served in District 2, where I live. I live up north, just to the east of the Air Force Academy in District 2. So I decided I would run, and I'd grown up in a family of service. Both my father and mother were both very active in our community in a small town in southeast Oklahoma. So I'd seen what service looks like. And so I decided to run. And fortunately, I was elected almost 4 years ago and have served my first term. In the leadership positions I've been in, I took over when Richard left the council. He mentored me, and I became the President Pro Tem, and then 2 years ago, I was elected as the President of the City Council. And I've always been very honored, and it's been a real privilege to serve on City Council, especially in the leadership positions. We're married. We live in the North End, as I mentioned. We have 3 adult children. We have 5 grandchildren, and they're all over the country, the U.S., and that's one of the main reasons that I'm not running for re-election is the amount of time that I devote to the city on the city council, especially as president, really has taken away from my grandchildren and my children to be able to go visit them. And so because it really is a volunteer capacity right now as far as the stipend or pay is concerned, that's one of the reasons I'm here today is to talk about that. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. And just an FYI to those panelists, we do have a couple. I just had a media person want to get in. They went out, so there could be some media in here as well. So FYI for that. All right, Mr. Tim Leigh, I believe you are next in alphabetical order. Go ahead. 1 minute for your introduction for us. And I just asked you to unmute, so you should be good to go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
There you go. Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be involved in community conversations. I wish I had a resume like Randy, but I don't. I actually I started out in Colorado Springs at Fort Carson in 1975 as an enlistee, and went away to college and came back because the winter here was not like it is today. They lied. It was supposed to be nicer. But I've been involved in business in Colorado Springs for a long, long time. I started a commercial real estate company called Hoff and Lee. We're a commercial real estate brokerage. I started it in 1987. It's now operated and owned by my children, which is a whole interesting dynamic. When I was on city council, I want to say it was from 2010 to 2012, it was 2 years. It was a very critical time in the history of the city. Decisions were made at that time that have impacted the city and will continue to impact the city, I believe, in a very positive way. But it was very contentious, a lot of arguments, a lot of personal assaults at the time, a lot of abuse for $6,250 a year. So I'm glad to have this conversation. When I wrote an article about salaries for councilors, I think in 2011, I advocated that salaries should be equal to what the mayor was making at the time, which was $96,000. And I made that advocacy not because I felt like we should be paid $96,000, but to stir that pot and to get that conversation started. And I do have a very strong opinion about where the salaries ought to be, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. But thank you for asking me to be part of the conversation. I look forward to it, and my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. All right. So then I think Mr. Richard Skorman is the next panelist. He's going to give you a quick introduction, and then we'll get started on those questions. Get really deep into it.
Well, good. Well, thank you for doing this. And it's an important discussion. I really would hope that more people pay attention to it, because I feel like this has been an issue really ever since I first got elected. So I got elected 4 different times. 1999 was my first time, 2003 second. I got reelected in 2017 and in 21, but I did run for mayor in 2011 and made it to the runoff. So I was pretty involved back then when Tim was on the council. Now, that was an intense time because of the fires that happened the year after, and that was quite a adventure to go through, Tim, I'm sure, and other people. But yeah, I have a passion for saving land. That's how I got involved in all this. I was one of the originators of the TOPS initiative, and we lost in 95, we won in 97, and then I was talked into running for council in 99. I had raised money for the Stratton Open Space, was the fundraising chair, and had spent a lot of time with different leaders in the community to do that. And Mary Lou Makepeace said, Richard, why don't you run for council? You'd be good. And you just have to cut your ponytail. So I did that. And then, the rest is history. And it's a big commitment in lots of ways, and we can talk more about it. But if you think about it, it's approximately a $3 billion organization. It's not just running a utility, it's running all 4 utilities. We're a huge city geographically. We have lots of other issues that we deal with, or that you deal with. I say we, but you, Randy, these days, because we run a major airport. We used to run a hospital. We run 2 golf courses. We run a big Pikes Peak mountain, and lots of other things that people don't realize. Cemeteries that are really involved with it all. It's not just the few things that people think we're involved with, public safety and roads.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for your introductions. So as I mentioned, a lot of you kind of joined. We're going to jump right into the questions, and we'll have possibly a plan of action at the very end, right? We will make sure you do it. We are the League of Women Voters. We are about action, and we will make a call for that at the very end of this. But so all of you panelists, we mentioned at the very beginning that they're, 40 to 50. Is that accurate that you're doing 40 to 50? Is it more 40 for 50 hours per week, including all of those commitments? So a pretty quick answer kind of from our panelists on that. Is that accurate?
Yes, this is Randy. I think that's about accurate. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, me too. I agree.
I think you can make it as many hours as you want to. I actually probably worked, of the 3 of us panelists, I'll bet I worked the least amount of hours. but you could make this a really full-time job.
Yeah, let me follow up on that. As Richard knows, when you're in the two leadership positions on the council
or
the leadership positions at the
utilities,
it is more, it's more than that, but I would say that's pretty good. That's about right.
All right. And I'm going to specifically ask you, since you're spotlighted on this one, Councilmember Helms, President Helms, can you describe a typical workload and responsibilities of that city council member? So kind of what does that look like in that 40 to 50 hours per week? What are you doing?
Well, we'll take this week that just ended. Monday was the work session. We were there till we started at 9 in the morning. I'm there way before that to meet with the staff in the city to make sure the agenda is set, to make sure we have a chaplain or a pastor or someone to lead the invocation. So I get everybody ready, and we get prepped, and we start at 9 o'clock. I think we ended around 4:30 in the afternoon on Monday afternoon on a work session. That's a little long for a work session. Normally they're not that long, but then the next day, Tuesday, was a long day. We started at 9, and again, I'm there way before that. We didn't end till 10:30 Tuesday night. So with all the issues that we have going on, as both Tim and Richard know well, sometimes it just takes that long. And so that was a little bit of a long day. That's not normal, but it's not that far off either. Typically, at least for the last 2 years that I've been president of the council, our regular sessions have been right around late in the afternoon, early evenings, between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock, typically is when they end. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of work that goes on before that and after. Honestly, that's just the 2 council meetings every other week. The board meetings for the utilities, I then have meetings to prepare for that. We have the utility board meeting next week on Wednesdays. So I'm also on 10 other boards, committees, and commissions. I'm on the Airport Advisory Commission. I'm on the Urban Renewal Authority Commission. I am on the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority Commission. I'm on the Colorado Southern Rail Commission. I'm on multiple small LETAC, Law Enforcement Transparency Commission. So some of those meet in the evenings. And that's just an example of 1 week. Not every week is the same. You get different time periods that happen, but honestly, then you add days like today, dinners. We go to quite a few dinners to represent the city and the council. We give a few speeches in the evenings. I give them on the weekends, and I'm very happy to do that. I go to quite a few because scouting is really important to me. I speak at quite a few Cub Scouts, Weeblo Scouts, scouting events. I speak at different community groups, League of Women Voters. I speak at other organizations. So time is pretty full, and that's just an example. Now I'll shut up over that. I talked a little long. I apologize for that.
No, you're good. It's a lot to put in even just a couple of weeks. So I'm going to kind of ask, because I think we referenced it in the earlier kind of introductions in our chat, but Mr. Skorman, I'm going to ask you of this one. I think you mentioned it earlier, but did you find the compensation adequate for the level of all of that stuff that's going on? And if you didn't, why not? And I think it kind of goes along with one of the questions that was just put in the chat from Justice Lord is, that's a lot of boards.
Yeah.
How does one afford to be on all of those boards? And this is again to Mr. Skorman, and still make a living on this salary? And again, Mr. Skorman, you're up on this one, please.
Well, I had to pay people to run our businesses. And luckily, my wife, Patricia, really jumped in when I got reelected in my second term. But boy, it was tough. I had to pay for full-time restaurant managers. At one point, I was managing the toy store when I first ran for council, so I had to pay for that. And I started adding up in my mind all the different times I had paid people to replace me in our businesses, and it's probably $500,000 to $750,000 I spent. And I'm not begrudging it. It was a great honor, and we had good business that we were able to make a profit from, but not as much, obviously. And the reason I left after getting elected in April of 21, I left at the beginning of 22 because of COVID. Our business, especially the side that I run, my wife runs retail, I run the culinary, was really struggling. We had closed for 18 months. We weren't sure if we opened, if we were going to be able to be in business again. I couldn't afford to hire a full-time manager because all those years, we just never had the nest egg that lots of other people might. But I can give you lots of examples. I can give you, Dr. Eastburn was, doing his emails at 3 a.m. so he could do his practice. Jim Null was a professor. Mary Lou Makepeace had to have another job when she was mayor. And she did the best she could to juggle it all. But unless she had gotten the job she got after she left council with the Gill Foundation, she wouldn't have retirement today. She would just be one of those people that had to live off of Medicaid and not be able to afford to live anymore, because she was there for, I think, for 16 years. But and then, Randy, you're absolutely right. It's not just what you were talking about, but there's also all these people that want to meet with you. So there were days where every half an hour I had somebody scheduled just to have a meeting. And by the way, I would stay away from the banquets and ribbon cuttings because I knew that maybe some of you were going to be there and I didn't have to be. But boy, it was a challenge just to have meeting after meeting and all the different responsibilities. And then you try to learn, a very complicated city and government, all 4 utilities. It's just not an easy one to get elected and just have, nod your head and say, okay, staff, do what you want to do. Very complicated.
Right. Okay, so that brings me into the next question for Mr. Leigh. Which actually, it kind of goes along with what you just said of, this has been an issue you guys have been talking about, I think, for a while, which Leigh says to me, you brought this, and Tim, if you wouldn't, excuse me, Mr. Leigh, I'm so sorry. Mr. Leigh, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of history about the voting, how voters voted this down, right? And tell us why. I think this was a question also in the chat, is why do you think the voters have turned this down and voted this down?
So it's pretty interesting that this conversation came up with you, because I had actually, I write a private reader's market report that goes out to a bunch of people, and I had thought about salaries for counselors as an issue that should be brought up maybe a month or 2 months ago. And then I got this invitation, and then I got a chance to talk to Rich Layden, who's one of the writers for the Gazette, probably last week or so. And it was interesting because he sent me actually a copy of all the articles that he's written since the maybe early 80s about salaries for counselors and the history of when it was proposed and when it finally got approved and all that stuff. Suffice to say, I don't have that committed to memory, but it's been a long process to go from 0 to 6250. And I think that there's probably 2 big issues, right? People say, is it worth it? And if you pay more, can you get a more diverse population of people to choose from? And the other side of that is, and probably the side I take, would be, it's a volunteer position. Nobody's holding a gun to any of our heads when we did it, but we really cared and loved for the community. And that's why we did it. And, so it's almost like instead of talking about salaries, we should have a conversation about what's the job. And when Randy itemizes all those things he's doing, and I've been there, same deal, same drill. I used to always get mad when I try to make a phone call to somebody and you couldn't get them to call you back for 2 or 3 days until I was in that chair. and then realize, like what Richard said, you know, every 15 minutes you got a new person, you know, and they're just stacked up. When I got elected to council, I had just come off a broken femur and I couldn't go upstairs, so I was holding meetings in La Baguette downtown, and they gave me a table in the back, and I'd have people lined up at tables waiting to see the counselor. I mean, it's ridiculous. So the demand on the time is unbelievable. And I wonder if, as part of this conversation, we should talk about what is the job, and is there a way to reimagine what that job is? My contention is, I'm going to go afield here just a little bit and can come back, but we should be, instead of maybe running for city council, we should be running for utility board. The utility board is a much more significant budget. And now what happens is you get elected to city council, and then they come to you and say, oh, by the way, there's this side hustle. It's called the utility company. In fact, what we ought to do is try and find competent people to run the utilities company and say, oh, by the way, there's a side hustle called the general fund budget or city council. So, you know, again, the kind of the interesting question might be is, what's the job, what's the role, and can we push the people who take those chairs into hierarchical position where they're not having to deal in the weeds as much on every issue? And so maybe structurally, council needs to have more assistants and more staff, and you know, kind of pre-think some of the ideology so the decision makers can make decisions and not have to be fact finders in addition to being decision makers. So city councilors are not compensated to the extent that they should be compensated. I'm not sure it's $96,000 a year, but and if I just take one more second, because I think it's germane, I had this conversation with the guys over at the utilities company, and because I was trying to figure out, could we pay city councilors through the utilities company board? And if you took a board member and had that equal salary across utility industry, our board members would be getting paid somewhere in the range of $60,000 a year just to handle that responsibility, not the city councilor's responsibility. And as far as I can tell, the utilities executives would be fine paying the board members a salary, but I think that the process would be is, you know, goes to utility board says, yes, we approve it, but then it goes back to city council, and then acting as the city council, they'd have to approve it, and then would have to go to a vote of the citizens. So no matter how we kind of settle this out, it ultimately, whether we get more pay, less pay, whatever, the citizens are ultimately going to get to decide what they want to pay for.
So great, great points. And there's thank you everybody for all your chats and comments. There's a couple things I need to address, Tim, as well. So sorry. I kind of want to circle back on a couple things. I believe Naomi and Beth, you guys have got some good things. I think, Beth, I already did your question, but hey, thank you for sending me Naomi's comments, because one of the things about your salary, or excuse me, stipend, it's not a salary, learning that as well, and possibly separating the Colorado Springs Utilities Boards and that role and responsibility. One of the other comments that I think we're going to get to in a little bit is, what does that look like? And a lot of that has to do with changing our charter, and a whole that opens up that realm of our options on what that looks like. So I think we're going to, I'm hoping I address that one. One of the things about donations, another question, if the pay is so low, how do we ensure that donations made don't influence council votes? And I'm going to ask, I'm going to probably ask that of all three of you, just to kind of give you 1 minute really quick, of how do you not make sure that that is not influencing council votes? And here's the thing, the transparency that is set up for this, right? You have to do some research. You have to do a little bit of digging. So Kate or Shanita, they're going to include a city campaign finance link in your chat. That is where, because these are city positions, it's not done by the state. Their campaign finance stuff is all in the cities, and Sarah Johnson's office manages all of that. So we're going to find a link for you to kind of check transparency. You got to do your due diligence with regards to things like that. But for all of our panelists, please tell us, how can we ensure that donations made don't influence your council votes? And I'm going to go, I believe, President Helms, we're going to go with you first, followed by Mr. Skorman, and then Mr. Leigh.
Sure, thank you. Yes, that's an issue that gets raised every once in a while. Hey, and all three of us know sometimes we get accused of being paid under the table, that we're paid for our votes. That's really disingenuous, and really, for those of us who have served in other capacities, whether it's in the military, like Tim and I, or whatever, you want to laugh at people who accuse you of doing that. And you brought it up. It's very transparent. Campaign donations are needed to get your signs out there, to get your name out there, to help advertise that you are running for a particular office. And every time our city attorneys tell citizens that raise this question, is that the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, has determined that campaign donations are fine and that are legal and are actually necessary. It's up to us individually to explain that to our citizens, that just because a donation was made to our campaign does not mean we vote yes or no based upon that campaign donation. It may be hard for some citizens to understand or believe that, but I believe that. I witness it every day, that council members are making decisions absolutely not based on donations. Are they making decisions based upon information and studying? And what Richard Skorman mentioned earlier, we study these issues. Individually, we may come up with different answers and different votes. I can guarantee you that's because of the information we get, and not because we received a donation from a certain organization, a certain developer, a certain individual, a certain constituent. That's my opinion. I've never seen a vote taken in my almost 4 years because of a donation to a specific council member. But again, that's me. And I try to tell that to our citizens. And sometimes it's challenging if other individuals make accusations like that. That's when it gets really ugly. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Skorman, quick comments, please.
Yeah, so Randy, you summed it up really well. In fact, you have to err on the side of caution when you're on council. So I did not vote on a lot of things that related to downtown, for example. Raising parking meter rates, I did have an opinion on it, but it would have affected my business. The Robeson Arena down by Colorado College, didn't want to vote on that. I recused myself quite often because of it. In fact, Mayor Lionel Rivera had to recuse himself probably, 3 or 4 or 5 times a meeting because he was a stockbroker and he couldn't vote on any bond issues. And the reason I know that is I was his vice mayor, so I had to run the meetings. But having said that, it's not the job it's certainly not for the money. Maybe it's $2.50 to $3 an hour. It's not because it's a stepping stone to other political offices. You don't see it much where council members then become state senators or governors. It's just not really in the cards. And then it's not something that you do because somehow people are going to do you favors. There's so many eyes. The city attorney's office is great. They really are. And there's a transparency out there. Very few times, all the councils I was on, 8 different councils, there was one example of somebody that had a contract with the city and he quickly withdrew it. And it just wasn't something that ever comes up. And so it's not because and if people give big donations, somehow everybody thinks, well, then you're going to go, vote for them. And, maybe in some cases that happens. People do want to get reelected so bad that they're going to, vote for that. But the other part is there are 527s that do get involved in high-profile mayor races. And for example, I had $500,000 spent against me from the Koch brothers, and it wasn't money that my opponent even knew about. And so those things can happen as well. But again, I don't see it as very common at all.
Mr. Leigh, quick comments on that question as well.
Well, the easy answer is integrity. You hope that the people that get elected are doing it for the right reason. I could go chapter and verse and go deep on some. When I was thinking about rerunning, I had a developer approach me and tell me, you are going to run for a second term because we put you there the first time, which was not true, but that was their perception. And so it can get pretty gritty. There's no doubt about it. And the real answer is integrity. You have to be in, you can run for whatever reason you want to run, but when you actually sit in that chair, let me just tell you, your demeanor changes, and all of a sudden that burden of responsibility falls on your shoulders, and it is an integrity issue. You don't want to get up there and not do the right thing for whatever your constituency group is. Here's a good example. As I mentioned, I do a lot of writing, and I communicate with a lot of the councilors and people that are in elected office still, and try and have some say in policy from the sideline. And during the O'Mara annexation process, I spoke with all the major players, the developers, and the people who were for the annexation, people who were against the annexation. And there were three major players, basically, and I spoke to all three groups and the principal players individually. And all they asked was a fair vetting of their ideology. And so it wasn't like they were saying, I had no vote anyway, but they never say, hey, you need to vote for me in this regard. Mostly what you're going to get from these big money donors is, would you please make sure you at least hear our argumentation and bring that forward? So when you make your decision, it's based on fact and merit, not just on some hardcore, I've given you all this money. Obviously, certain constituency groups want to make sure their candidate gets elected, but man, once you take that chair, guarantee, and I know a lot of people who've been in elective office for many, many years, including Richard, all those years. And Richard, there's no better man of Richard Skorman or Randy Helms with integrity. And I don't know anybody that took a position that was doing it because they felt like they were going to get paid something on the side. That just doesn't happen. And by the way, one of the things I wanted to say previously, Randy, when you went through all those different jobs that you had, the one thing which I think, and I haven't seen it maybe since I was on council, but when I was on council, because we were dealing with the Memorial Hospital transition and then the utilities company and the scrubber and all those very controversial things, there were 2 times during my council where I was offered police security because there had been so many threats on my life. And, that's the thing that people don't realize. And I was over driving through old Colorado City today, and there were a bunch of protesters over there with masks on saying Trump is the Antichrist, and whether he is or isn't the point. But you have these contentious political groups, and that's the thing that the average person doesn't realize. And so for $6,250 a year, I'm going to have some guys want to chase me down and shoot me. I mean, come on. And that's like legit stuff. And some of these issues get so contentious that that's the level that it gets to. So it's not just the jobs, it's the emotional distress. When I was on council, I actually had a heart attack and didn't tell anybody, but it was that level of stress that we were dealing with at that time. So, at the end of the day, do councilors need to get paid more? Yes, but here's the thing. You can't pay councilors what it's worth. That's the issue.
Well, we can't pay teachers what they're worth either. So that's a whole nother conversation for another day. And I want to kind of get a couple questions from the chat as well. President Helms, you mentioned all those things about what you guys are doing. Is there a current job description in place for council members that we as citizens can access? Is there a list of all that kind of stuff somewhere?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there is.
Where do we go for that?
So the city of Colorado Springs.gov under City Council, and in there is a description. It's very long of the list of items that we do. And as my fellow council members know, approving the Colorado Springs city budget is one of the most I would say one of the primary things we do. Talks about land use, public safety, fire, police. The budget that Colorado Springs City Council approves is one of the major things that we do. But that list is right there. Okay. City of Colorado Springs.gov, Colorado Springs City Council, and it's pretty simple to get to. And It's actually pretty simple to get to what you mentioned earlier, Shelley, to the finance campaign reports.
Yes, we've already included that link in the chat. I think
Good.
Kate is probably working on the one that you just talked about with. So Woody, I believe that was your question, and look for Kate or Shanita to put that link in to what Mr. President Helms just mentioned, is that job description for us to kind of review. And then another question is, and just this is kind of yes or no for all of you panelists, do you know of any other cities that have a municipal board that oversees the utility as well? Comparing apples to apples, any others?
I do not know. I'm sure there are, but I haven't paid any attention to that.
All right, that might be one that we need to.
I
Mr. Leigh,
don't
Mr.
think
Skorman?
I think you have like, not like we have a municipality, but I think that there are co-ops. So, but they're not, be real small.
Okay.
Nothing on our scale.
Okay. All right. Mr. Skorman, anything that you can think of?
No, and especially, this is a $1.5 billion operation, maybe 2,000 employees. It is one of the largest municipally owned 4-tier utilities in the country. And then you add the complication of our water shortage in the West and Colorado, and all the energy requirements that are now in place statewide, whether you agree with them or not. But, the Drake power plant really needed to be closed anyhow. I've been pushing for that for a long time. But having said that, very complicated, because it's Colorado Springs Utilities not only serves people in Colorado Springs, but it serves a region. There's lots of other people that do use us, Manitou and other, in different ways. But the other piece is that nobody knew that we were going to have 75% saturation of air conditioners. We've gotten warmer. It's just absolutely clear. When I first moved here in 1970, nobody had an air conditioner. So that's what power is doing these days. And I can go on and on, the lawsuits, EPA, the sewage we put in the Fountain Creek. I mean, very complicated. Our water is very complicated. We are so lucky to have 78 million new gallons of water coming with the Southern Delivery System that other communities would just die for. But boy, was that a complicated one to put together that council was very, very much involved with.
I believe, I'm sorry, President Helms, did you have a question?
Oh, I just
Or a comment?
Yes, real quick. When I was here in 1986, teaching up at the Air Force Academy and lived in Briargate, bought a home. We built a brand new home, no air conditioning. We built it without air conditioning. So to Richard's point, now you can't do that. So just a little comment.
Okay, perfect. All right. I believe, Gary, I think you have your hand up. I'm ready to, if you've got a question, a live question instead of in the chat. If I missed that, are you ready to ask that real quick? I must have lost you.
Hang on a second. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. There's a Sacramento Municipal Utility District, which is independently elected body. And when Tom Strand was president of this council, I suggested to him that he get aboard a plane, fly to Sacramento, pick up SMUD's playbook, come home, put Colorado Springs Utility on it, and inject it into the city charter.
Perfect. So, Gary, thank you for your information. The notes that we're taking today, and especially what you've texted in the chat as well, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, SMUD, all of this information is going to be gathered basically because I told you at the beginning there is a call to action with this and what that looks like. We as a league believe in representative government, and we do not believe that $6,250 is representative or allows a representative government. It almost actually restricts it. So based off of that, and thank you for those, because you are 100% correct, having something to compare it to and be able to work it into our charter, because that is what we are, I think ultimately the goal is here is to amend that charter. All right, so we got to move on. Impact and value. We talked about job description. So let's talk about what does increasing this salary do. Okay, so panelists, and I do have, I'm not forgetting you guys in the chat. I'm going to come back to all of you, but if we increase this, because I will tell this to those listeners, Council Member Yolanda Avila was supposed to be here today. She had technical difficulties. As soon as we went remote, she said, I'm probably going to have some issues. It just virtually we're having some difficulties getting her in. When we started looking for panelists, the league is all about both sides of a conversation. We give you the pros of raising it and usually the cons of raising it. We had difficulty finding individuals that were former council members that actually had done this job, that were actually against raising city council pay. Only one of the former council members, their wife hung up on me and wouldn't even take a call. But that tells me that I think we've progressed a little bit more with regards to how the voters may think. And it might just be city council members that think that it should be paid more because they're doing the work. But part of this is educating the voters and what that job entails, right? Because I don't think 80% of the people really understand that the majority of, that budget that you're working with is the utilities budget and those 4 utilities. So this education process is huge for us. In addition, remember, we are obviously getting ready for election day. Municipal elections are on April 1st. So we're going to be sharing some screens with you as well. But know that, this is all relevant to the league and we appreciate you guys being here. But so we're going to start with, I'm going to start with Mr. Leigh, go backwards on this one. What does increasing the salary do? What do you think it does?
Well, I think the argument for increasing the salaries is it brings in a broader base of potential candidates to, take the office. I guess, I'll give you the counter argument because you said you couldn't find anybody. And I'd be happy to be the counter argument guy because I think that at some point, we really don't need to raise salaries to like a salary level per se. It's a stipend. And I think that we should increase the stipend to at least cover some of the elected officials' monthly costs. That's fair. But when you talk about salaries, I want to point out that, okay, are you talking about like 60,000, 45,000, 90,000? In the old days, city councilors were like the dean of the community, right? The leaders, and they would go down to council and use their age, their experience, and their wisdom to make these big decisions. And so if you raise salaries to like a salary, so it's like a job, you're going to have a lot of people going to apply for the job, figure out how to get elected, and I'd argue maybe open themselves up to a little bit of special interest influence. But if you raise that salary, you're going to bring people in that you might find you have a lot of people that it's on the job experience kinds of people. And I would, again, you need a counter argument. I'll counter argue you, and I'll just ask: is that the kind of person you want to have sitting there running a $1.5 billion, utility company? I pointed out, and Yemi and I are friends, and I'm not picking on Yemi. In fact, I always compliment him for this. He's the guy that said he had no experience. The other guy had a lot of experience. And so do you want like 9 people sitting up there with no experience? Okay, so that's, if you open it up for salaries, all of a sudden you're gonna have a lot of people come out of the woodwork. And when the last mayor's election, where there were like 9 candidates, and it's like ridiculous. So the idea of a salary for a lot of people, that's a very attractive idea. But just realize that if you pay salaries, you're going to get a whole crop of different people who have no experience and no business being in those chairs to our community's detriment. And so I'll take that opposite position. And so again, I believe we should increase the stipend. I'm not in favor of increasing and paying salaries.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Skorman.
Yeah, I disagree a little bit and agree with you, Tim. I think there's a balance. So we don't have a real representative council because it's mostly retired people. I hate to say it, or business people that run for 2 or 4 years, like a Michelle Tallarico, and then have to leave. And yes, there is experience with older people, and I could say that it's absolutely true. Although you get to a certain age, you lose your memory, so I don't know if that matters. But having said that, it would be great to have a council that represented the community more, maybe more people of color, maybe more younger people, maybe more women, maybe more people that were mothers. I just think that right now it can be mostly retired military. No offense, Randy, and you're a great council person, but when I think back about all the years that I was on council, the ones who stuck with it were mostly retired or wealthy. And I'm not sure that's what you always want to have represented. But the other side of that coin, and you're right, Tim, is if you pay too much, then it becomes a real job for people that they will maybe do anything that they need to get reelected, although you can only get elected to 2 4-year terms and you have to leave for 4 years. But having said that, if there's $125,000 a year, that would be enough of an income that people would do whatever they needed to get elected, and may make decisions that wouldn't be in the interest of the community, but maybe in their own interest. And so I struggle with the county commissioners getting $125,000 a year because I think they work probably less than city council, but it's what the state mandated. I'm not blaming them, but and the mayor really is a very full-time job. If we didn't pay Yemi what we're paying him, he wouldn't be able to be the mayor. He just couldn't afford to raise his kids. But there's a balance, and I think it needs to be at least whatever the minimum cost of living is for Colorado Springs. They say now it's $23 an hour, maybe $46,000 a year. Although the voters overwhelmingly disapproved by 80%. $47,000 a year back in 2015. So it's always a challenge with the voters. And then, Tim, I wanted to address a little bit more, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. But yeah, a separate utility board would help. But Randy, be honest, it was about 25% of what I did. And it's not like I didn't really care about it and there weren't very important issues, but it wasn't the majority of the time where all those meetings and all the committees you're on, all the different people that want to meet with you. One thing we haven't talked about are constituent outreach. Huge. You can get 300, 400, 500 people that want to talk to you or on the phone or visit with you in a month over whatever issues are going on. And so that's a whole nother piece that people don't. But it needs to be enough so maybe younger people that are minorities, people that don't have the ability to work for $3 an hour could be on council.
All right. I'll follow, Shelley, I'll follow up with that. I'll start out by saying that I think having some more pay, we call it pay or stipend, it does allow other individuals to be able to weigh, okay, that's enough, whatever it is, that's enough that either my spouse has a paying job, a well-paying job, or there's enough that I could commit to the time to serve my community. And there are also times when you have to look at it as a job that you're serving your community. But in America, typically, people do not want to work for nothing. And to be honest, $6,250 a year is not, to me, is nothing. It costs me more than $6,000 a year to drive to City Hall every day, to drive out to the airport, to go to the Airport Advisory Commission once a month, sometimes twice, to drive to the different parts of the city, to go meet with people, as Richard mentioned, to go to the different boards and committees and commissions that I'm on. So the $6,000 a year for me doesn't even cover my costs. That technically I could file for some of that to be reimbursed, but in any bureaucracy to try to file to get reimbursed for certain things is painful, and I just refuse to do it. And I just accept the fact that I'd lose some funding on those kinds of things. So in America, under our capitalist system, getting paid for the work you do, I think, is important. I agree with everyone about if you have some level of pay, and let's just call it, I will recommend half the salary of the mayor, and to have the wording in the charter that it will keep pace with the mayor's every 4 years. See, there's an ordinance that states every 4 years the mayor's pay is evaluated and applied some cost standard of living cost increase to the mayor's salary. Right now, it's roughly, I think it's around, I'd have to go back and check, $130,000 a year. Also, the county commissioner's pay is $150,000 a year now. So
Wow.
that's the level of full-time pay for those two positions. I think, and I've actually recommended, I've worked on this now for the last over 3 years of trying to get to a point, and I may be going beyond what this particular question is, and we can talk about that more later. I recommend a couple of things. One, city council members' pay, stipend, call it what you want, is roughly 50% of the mayor's pay. And in that language is the language that says it stays, you have some cost of living allowance that matches the mayor's. Again, not in the same dollar amount, but along the same language lines.
Can I add something, Randy?
Sure.
So in your proposal then, would a city councilor's job be couched as a full-time job and the city councilor would not be able to have another job?
So that's an excellent point, Tim, because I think that's what it says about the mayor.
Right, it does, and that's my point. So the mayor's full-time job, but then all of a sudden you delimit a lot of people. Like I would never have, I can't give up my job to go become, for 70 grand. It's not worth me to give up my job. So by doing that, so that's why I think you get into that real kind of gray area.
Right.
And I agree they ought to get paid enough to cover costs, but I worry about changing the charter to the extent that in this specific instance where you say, okay, if you're a city councilor, we know it's a full-time job, so it's a full-time job. You can't do your other job. And that takes out Richard Skorman because he runs a business. Right.
It would take out.
How horrible would it have been if we hadn't had Richard Skorman for all those terms?
Right. No, I agree totally. I think I agree with you, Tim. I would not put that in there, that you cannot own a business, have a job, do those kinds of things. I think that's it. I think that's wrong. So that's why I wouldn't do the high end, I wouldn't do any more than half of the mayor's pay, simply because that would be one of the reasons. And maybe it's not 50%, maybe it's something else, but I think you attach it to the language about the mayor's pay. And I can read you, I actually have pulled up an ordinance from 2013 that talks about a couple of these things. And I can read that a little bit later if we want to. I think you attach it so that you do get some cost of living allowance as time goes by. I think that's important. Whatever dollar figure, if it's 20,000, 30,000, whatever, you get some cost of living allowance on there. Those are my comments.
You know, and again, just to to finish that thought, if we have to take it to a vote to get salaries, but the issue is it covering expenses, is there a way through council to cover more expenses? So for example, is there a way to say, okay, everybody gets $1,000 a month car allowance? Boom. That's it. You know, I mean, it's a little bit of semantics, maybe trickery, but is that something that's worthy of talking about?
And another comment in our chat, and I'm trying to keep up with things, so I apologize. Fort Collins has tied council and mayoral pay to AMI, and that was mentioned as area median income as well from Steph. What would you all think of tying council salary to AMI in some way? That was another question from Steph Vigil.
Yes, I think that would be good. And mileage is something that you can't claim, but yeah, I was like you, Randy, I never did. I did park for free at the airport. I guess I'm a culprit that way. But having said that, you know, it's just so much. You know, how do you don't have insurance, health insurance for sure, no retirement, nothing. Well, actually, I think you are paid a little bit into the retirement fund that you get a refund at the end, but it's 10% of your salary, so whatever it is, $500–600 a year. But having said that, it's not you don't have that many of those kind of benefits. I guess you can eat for free a fair amount.
But you
Yeah.
don't get any mileage or internet reimbursement. No health, life
Well,
insurance.
you can if you want to ask for it. Yes. No, you can.
Okay.
But it is a pain. It is a real pain.
Not that government red tape. Okay, sorry, excuse me. Okay, I want to you guys talked about public perception, right? We've already talked about that. It went to your voters. It lost by 87%, right? In doing some other research about how other people went from a lower pay to a higher pay with regards to their, they might have gotten nothing and then they were getting, $30,000 after 5 years. What can we do to help with public perception? Because nobody, to me, the very first thing is you get your council member and you get your mayor on board. And usually when something like that goes on your ballot, then your voters are usually more inclined to say yes, because your leaders are supporting it. What does that look like with regards to getting your voters on board?
I'll start out. So yes, it requires education. Just like any issue that's put on the ballot, you have to advertise that, you have to educate the public, because the public has a life every day that has nothing to do with what's going on with the political life or real, issues in the city, other than when it becomes important to them. So there needs to be a broad educational campaign to let the public know that their city council members are actually putting in time and learning the issues. That's probably one of the biggest things I see, is that I don't think citizens believe that we really invest our time and energy into understanding issues, and we're just making a vote, which is, as the three of us know, is far from the truth. We do invest our time and our energy, our knowledge, our experience into trying to do the best for our city on our votes. So an educational campaign would be required, I believe.
So before Mr. Skorman and Mr. Leigh, I'm going to kind of hold you on that. I need to kind of ask you a follow-up question, please. We put it to here's the league believes in listening to the voters when the voters pass something or when they don't pass something. Coming back after so many years, I think this was the 2015 vote. So we're now looking at 10 years later. It's a long time to be discussing something, but just in November, the city, we had two opposite ballots with regards to recreational marijuana. And, for the league, we talk about educating the voter, and that was extremely difficult to educate voters on. How do we prevent something? How do we just do better? That, I guess, is my question to you, because that to me was not doing better for the voters. How can we do better there with regards to this specific question on city council pay? Because it is very, very confusing. So
I think the missing element in this whole conversation is a sponsor or a leader. And to me, it's okay, who wants to grab onto this issue and run with it and make it your lead issue? So, for example, my lead issue right now is to try and make Colorado Springs the safest city in America. And I spend a lot of time advocating for that issue because it's something I believe in. I'm not going to personally subvert that issue and replace it with the salary issue. And I think if you look across the spectrum of leaders who could have an impact, you'd say, what's your issue? And everybody has an issue. And would you be willing to make that issue second place for a salary issue? And I think that that's the really big problem that you have pushing this idea forward. Nobody wants to make this their issue because nobody wants to be that guy. And until you can get a sponsor who will go raise money and do all the things Randy just suggested, this is going to be dead on arrival, unfortunately, for all the people that would be impacted positively.
Shelley, can I comment on that before Richard does?
please, yes, go right ahead.
What Tim said is exactly right. I can tell you from my experience over the last almost 4 years, I jumped on this issue pretty much right off the bat after being elected. And I tried to build a team of a couple of council members and a couple of campaign managers to go out and build a campaign for this specific issue about council member pay. And I will tell you, there was zero interest in the previous administration, the city administration, the mayor and the city administration. There was zero interest in our current administration and mayor on this. Why? Because of what Tim just said. We had back in with Mayor Southers, we had tops that we had to get passed. We had multiple issues that were going to be on ballots. This time, what we had 2C on the ballot back in November. So you've got really important issues that if you add something like pay for city council members, administrations believe that will take away from the important issues that are on the ballot. And Tim highlighted that very well. So I experienced that as someone who I was starting to build a coalition to campaign for members' pay, but it clearly became, and whether it was the Chamber of Commerce, whether it was other organizations in the city, even though people say that council members' pay is important, all of a sudden it doesn't become as important as TOPS, as 2C, and other issues. Those are my comments on that.
Mr. Skorman, did you have anything to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can always, and you're absolutely right, Randy. It's always tough, and you wish that it was the most important issue, but there's so many other ones that come up. Every election, thanks to Tabor, we have to vote on things, we have to extend them, renew them, and all the things that we do. And so there's voter fatigue especially about raising taxes when the property taxes have gone up so much. When there's and this isn't raising taxes, but it's taking money away from other issues. People are worried about public safety, the police and fire response times. You can go through the whole list, the roads. It's all getting better. And thank you, Randy, and your council and previous councils. But having said that, it's just not going to be a big priority for the voters. Maybe the right election, maybe if it's a presidential election, you have a much larger voter turnout. People tend to vote more for things that have to do with finances. But it's always hard to find a clear election where there's nothing else to vote for except for this. And so my thought, and I know this wouldn't fit with your feelings, Tim, about having a separate utility board, but it might be the only way that you get council pay is to have utilities really pay the board and know that they're footing some of the bill and being honest about it because it's something that they want to have good council members and people that really understand utilities. So maybe some of the people that do get elected will have more of a utility background. Now I could also see the other side. It would be great to have, more professional people on utility board that weren't just citizens. But I think it's nice to have that balance. I think that if you just have it one way or the other, you're going to have it skewed. And yes, you'll have you have a utility board now where you maybe don't have people with the technical experience to make these decisions, and they tend to maybe go along with the utility staff more than they could or should. And but on the other side, to not have any citizen representation, in my mind, is a slippery slope as well. I like that hybrid that we did with Memorial Hospital before you guys ended up leasing it to UC Health.
And Shelley, one quick comment on the utilities. In my discussion, because I am interested in the council members' pay, utilities have told me that it still would require a vote. Utilities that's volunteered, let's just use an example of paying half. If some type of council member pay could occur, whatever that is, whatever value that is, utilities is willing to foot half of that. So, but no matter what, anything and everything has to go to the citizens for a vote. So it doesn't matter if utilities is going to pay half of city council's pay. it still has to go to the citizens for the vote.
Well, if you want to
Sorry
play,
about that, Randy. Yeah,
if
you're right.
you
I
want
guess
to play political sleight of hand, you could just get the utilities company to pay the entire salary, and there's your marketing thing, because the big bad utility company, taking all our money. So at least they're paying the utility board and the city councilors get paid. So I mean, that is a real slippery slope that I wouldn't be in favor of. But there's ways to get there. But I think that the three of us hopefully all agree that the issue is a sponsorship issue, and nobody wants to grab this thing because it's not going to be a winner.
Yeah,
Well,
and I got
we at the league believe in issues that, may not be really popular, but we do believe in supporting. So this might be a good place for me to add, for those of you that are on the call today, I told you that there will be a call to action. We are about 45 minutes before the end of our discussion. I still have a whole bunch of questions. We would like you to please put your email address in the chat. We will make sure that you get information. We will be starting a group, whether or not the league is the sponsor, based off of what Mr. Leigh and Mr. Helms are talking about. It would not be a winning issue if the league was that sponsor. So know that we do want to work on that issue. We believe in representative government. This is something that, again, we're not all about just getting out the vote and voter education. So issues are very important to us, and this is one. Now, whether or not our members, this is the great thing about the league. We are member driven. So this conversation even kickstarts it with our own members to decide if this is going forward of what we will do. Okay, so know that that's for us. I kind of want to ask a couple more questions from the chat as well. One of the questions was, why not get it on the ballot for April? That is not enough time. I believe it's the end of January when you have to have ballot questions in, if I remember correctly, or something pretty darn close to that. And so it would definitely not. And of course, we at the league, we support moving the spring municipal elections to the fall due to the voter turnout disparity between minority voters and white voters. So know that that is on us as a league. We have sued the city. It is still a, kind of in the works, and that is kind of something that we, as another issue for the league, is very important, is voter turnout. So we don't care which one we move it to. It's just something that we believe in, is the spring elections. All of this basically in context is this requires a vote of the people, because you are changing the charter, all of that. So I want to kind of move the discussion, if we could, into steps on what that takes. I'm still going to hit some of your questions, because we do know that, again, this is just, it doesn't work for a lot of people to run for office and pay their mortgage at the end of the day, because they can't really do a full-time job in addition to this. So implementation, what does that look like? I'm going to ask all of you guys on the panel, in your opinion, okay, let's say the league or the organizing task force or group that wants to do this and get this on the ballot. What, in your opinion, is a blueprint to get that done? What do we have to do in order to get it to the people and change that charter? And I already hear about the sponsors, so if you could just kind of skip over that with regards to the educational part. What does that blueprint look like for you? And we're going to go with Mr. Skorman, you're first, followed by Mr. Leigh, and then Mr. Helms.
Well, if there was enough enthusiasm from the league and other people in the city, the best way, what we did with TOPS, the first time we had council put TOPS on the ballot in November, it was I think it was a state election that, didn't have as much of a voter turnout as presidential. It was 90 in 95. But having said that, we collected signatures and brought it back in 97, and that's when it passed. And it was the first time that voters voted to increase their taxes for anything since Tabor passed in 92. So we were very proud. It didn't pass by a lot, but it did pass. When we extended it in 03, it passed by huge amounts, so people really did like it. But having said that, that's the way to really do it, because in that process, you are educating voters, having conversations with them. And if people were willing to spend the time to collect signatures, if council places it on the ballots, no matter when it is, if they place it during a higher voter turnout election, it costs taxpayers money. That's not cheap. $250,000, 300,000, whatever it is these days, Randy. And if council just puts it on in a typical council election in April, low voter turnout. And it may appear that council's trying to give themselves a raise, and that could be a real factor. But if signatures could be collected and that discussion could happen in a broader way. And by the way, thank you for doing this today. But 35 people on, it's not, a few news stories. It's not going to, hit the media and become this huge issue. It really may take hard work for it to happen.
And we're all about hard work with the league. We're not afraid of hard work. All right. So Mr. Leigh, I think you were going to be next on that one, on your comments as well. Thank you, Mr. Skorman, for that. Appreciate that.
I think Richard probably hit most of the nails on the head with respect to process and that kind of stuff. What I like about venues like this and in the chat and everything is that this begins a conversation that needs to occur. I'm not sure I agree that we're even asking the right questions yet, but you get to the right questions by starting the conversation. And so we might start out by asking about salaries, but again, we might trend to go over toward, structural council, role of councilors. Whose ever dog was barking just made my dog bark, so that's pretty funny. But no, this is a great start. It's a lot of marketing. There's smart marketing people out there that can give you, how to step by step. I could give you my opinions, which would involve a lot of social media and that kind of stuff. But I'll throw one question out there kind of randomly because I thought about it in this last segment. But it's just because someone wants to be a city councilor doesn't necessarily mean that person should be a city councilor. And I think that also you look at the salary component. Do you invite people that really aren't going to be in the city's best interest? So it's tough questions, hard questions, and I'm grateful that you're hosting this forum and that we can ask these questions, because unless you're willing to ask them and have an honest dialogue, you can't get to the best city governance. And that's really what we deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Leigh. And I will come back to you after this question with the right questions, because those are going to be the starting point of what the next steps are. You kind of just led us into the next steps with your answer. But Mr. Helms, your blueprint, please, for success.
Yes. So I've been in the 4 years of being on council. I've been on multiple campaigns for issue campaigns. And here's the reality. It will take campaign managers. It will take groupings to do that. The dollar amounts are $250,000 to $400,000 to raise to have a legitimate campaign for any issue. For the most recent ones, the 2C, before that TOPS, other issues that I've been involved in has been anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 that you have to raise because of TV ads, because of social media ads, all the advertising, and to get that issue out there so that the voters of Colorado Springs can understand the issue. That's the reality. So it requires a campaign. It requires campaign funding. So added to what both Tim and Richard have said.
And we all know not everybody likes to raise money. So just even being here for the 35 people that are here, this is definitely a subject that not a lot of people like to talk about. I mean,
Right.
It's just kind of dry.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Campaigning is a professional job in and of itself. So there's professionals out there that will help you on whatever issue that you want to get out to the public. And that requires campaign funding. That is the American way.
Well, I'm hoping that we have at least 3 sponsors who can at least support the cause that are on the call as panelists right now. All right, so I'm going to take it back to Mr. Leigh. What are those questions that we're not asking that you think we should be asking? Can you give me a few? Highlight those for me.
Yeah, certainly I think that, we should take a look at, should we have a combined utility board with city council? I mean, that's always that's an oldie but a goodie, and that's always controversial, but it's a relevant conversation. And if you can divide the budgets out, then all of a sudden maybe the requirement for increased salary is less important. Should there be a structural change in the way that council's managed, and should city council have more staff and assistants so that they don't have to spend all their time as deep in the weeds to research and get information so they can make good decisions. I mean, those would be two right off the top of my head. I think that we elect people for their wisdom, hopefully, that they bring to the table, even if it's newfound wisdom once they sit in that chair, but their wisdom nonetheless. And so it's like you have, use Yemi, for example. Yemi is not researching every location that's a possibly good location for a police academy. He has several people researching that stuff. Travis Deal over at the utilities company is not digging in the weeds about, where the next, line route should be. He has staffs of people figuring that out, right? We get people at a high level to make the decisions based on all the staff and all the research, because we can't leverage ourselves out to that extent and do a good job. And so, look at the structure of how we do what we do, and maybe, all institutions, should be subject to high scrutiny and review over time to make sure that they're operating at maximum efficiency. I'm one of those guys that said we should revisit how we have a library system. And as soon as I say that, everybody throws stones at me, and that's fine. But I still think that at some point the library system needs to be reevaluated. An institution's been there for a long time. It's grown past its original charter. And so it's the same comment you could make about city council. And so revisiting what the structure is and how it works, I mean, those to me are the kind of charter changes we ought to look at. A charter change for salary doesn't seem like it's an appropriate use of our time. That should be more administrative almost. But because the charter is the way it is, it rises up to a charter level. And I just think that that's one of those structural changes you could reevaluate. There's a couple of questions just off the top of my head.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Skorman, Mr. Helms, do you guys have any other questions that we should be asking as well?
Well, I mean, it certainly, having a separate utility board would help. That would be less time for council, and they could really focus more on all the other issues, land use, public safety, all the different issues that are involved with city council. But the other one is that council, it has gotten better. And Randy, you were around back when I was elected to council in '99. There was one person who helped council, Dean. And then we had Marty, who helped the mayor. And Dean and Marty ran the whole show. And the workload maybe was less then, but, not that much. And so today, I think, is it 7 staff members that council have? 6, something like that.
We have 8.
8.
I've been able, to.
Okay, there you go. And so, there is more help. But what I always wanted was a personal administrator for me, right? And have that ability, but I think the staff today does a great job, the constituent outreach, all the different moving parts, all the, 45 boards and commissions, 50, something like that.
Yep.
And so there's a person that handles all that, and really great staff who work hard. But maybe that could be restructured in a way that provides some more help for council. And as you say, Tim, that might be one of the answers. But I still go back to this notion of it's going to be mostly retired people or wealthy people. That's the only way you're going to have, that's what you're going to have on council. You're not going to have a truly representative government. And that's the part that just gnaws at me. I would love to see more voices. Very few of the people that were there when I was there were younger than 35 or 40. They're mostly in their 50s, sometimes 60s and 70s.
And just one of our issues that the league does believe in is representative government. So, which is why we're having this conversation today. All right. Did everybody on the panel Mr. Helms, did you get to say any questions that we should be asking as well? Did I miss you?
Yeah. So real quick, you just used the term representative government. I would use that as a major talking point, and develop your questions from that. The other issue is it's a commitment. I don't care what you're paid. it is a real commitment to our community to be on city council. City council is not there, as I think Tim and Richard both mentioned, it's not there as a stepping stone for another political position. Some people do that and move forward and are elected to other positions. But I think the questions are, do you want to commit to serving your community? And do you want to be compensated at some level? Again, it doesn't have to be a $100,000 a year job. It doesn't have to be, but it should not be a $10,000 a year volunteer position either. So I think questions in those arenas, we try to keep it simple, talking about representative government. We try to keep it simple that you're volunteering, you're more than volunteering, to support and serve your community. And there should be some level of compensation to that continued support to your community, some level. That's the discussion and the questions. I think asking those questions that get some level of compensation is important. And I don't think we quite hit on that yet, and I don't know what the real answer is. My recommendation is 50% of the mayor's pay, only because that's a point. It doesn't have to be that. I think it should be some percent. And those are the kinds of the questions I would have your group asking. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
can I ask one more question? So what does it take so it's a volunteer job, right? And so you throw out salaries, does that take away from the volunteer nature? So maybe one of the questions that we should be asking is, what do we need to do to make it more enticing to volunteer for that job? And I don't know that salary is the answer.
Well, I think that's the problem, right? It shouldn't be a volunteer position, right?
Should it?
I don't know of a city this size that is a volunteer position like that. And again, when you make it a volunteer position, I'm going to use myself as an example. I volunteer probably 40 hours a week with the league, right? As the president of my league, that's, the role I volunteered for, knowing that I wouldn't be compensated. There's no way I could run for office for a city council, keep my league position and the actual volunteer job that I do, knowing that I would represent my district.
We have a pool of how many people live in Colorado Springs now? 500,000, or pick a number.
480.
Okay, so out of that 480,000, we need 9 volunteers. And so that gives you a pretty doggone big basis of diversity and all the different things. And I like to ask the hard question. So what do we need to do to make it to where you drag out 9 people out of those 480,000 to want to volunteer? And I would argue, I don't know that it's necessarily the money.
But if you'd ask that question, would you get the same 3 retired white men or 9 retired white men in this case? That's just Shelley's opinion, not the spokesperson. And it was my dog, by the way, barking. My Great Dane is here looking at me saying, hello, are you about done? But either way, I'm going to launch a poll. If you guys, for those of you that are on, you're seeing a poll on your screen. If you would please answer the next couple of questions. It's just a couple things. We're just going to kind of get your opinion. So after that one, I'm also going to launch a second question. It's going to be a little bit longer. I want to know how you think the best way to educate. Going to a couple things on our chat. Again, having city council be a volunteer job. There are cities, that was one thing we wanted to talk about. There are cities around our area that do not get paid, that are volunteer city council members. I believe Fountain, Dr. Duncan is on. She gets a stipend for attending meetings. It is not, it is as a volunteer position as well. So there are many cities around us that are much smaller that do not get paid, that are 100% volunteer as well. I think we, again, as the league, believe in representative government. It is very difficult to have other people say, yes, I want to volunteer for that. And if you do that, like you said, the 9, how do you know that those 9 are the best? And I think taking it to the voters and allowing the voters to choose I am all about choices. If I have 10 people on the ballot, then I am educating myself as a voter about those 10 people and going to candidate forums and vote 411. I do know that I am in the minority in that with regards to civic engagement, but it is the league's job to educate our voters, to help them to be more empowered, to give them more information. So for this, the volunteer and separation, I think that's definitely part of our conversation and what that would look like and how that would actually be implemented, because implementation is the other part. Voters can vote 1 year and then implementation might take 5 to 10 years. So know that this is a huge process. And you said it, Mr. Leigh, we are just starting the conversation. I'm going to remind you, if you wouldn't mind, please put your email address in that chat so we can get you on that list if you are interested in furthering this discussion. We do know that it's a huge $400,000 investment from a sponsorship and money perspective. So we do know that that is.
Shelley, by the way, because I'm only make this comment because you made it first.
Please.
And said that specifically white men. And Roland Rainey is running for council. He's like one of the top guys. I mean, he's a man of color, and I 100% support him. So I want to make sure that we're open in that whole conversation, and we're all open to diversity because we want to have the city represented across the whole board. But there's a guy running that I 100% support, and he's going to be a great councilor when he gets elected, and he's a man of color.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You are 100% right. There are many people that are running that are different than what I've seen in the 5 years, 6 years that I've lived here. So that's progress to me. I think that's a very special place to be in. And having Mayor Mobilati elected, that was a brand newbie. I can't remember which panelist mentioned it earlier, but he's new, right? So to have a new person in those roles as a voter, that's exciting to me. Even if they don't have any experience, if the voters have voted that person in, I think that's, we at least have to give them a chance with regards to that. So that's how I see that. All right, this is a great discussion. We're at 2:40. I am going to give the panelists, I apologize if I missed your questions. Thank you, Kate, for putting stuff in the chat and messaging me. I appreciate that. Shanita, thank you for your help in organizing. But let's kind of give our panelists, and I'm going to start with President Helms, followed by Mr. Leigh, and then Mr. Skorman giving us, kind of just give us, your thoughts on today and anything that maybe, that we may have missed, or just wrap up your thoughts for us for a few minutes.
Sure. This is exactly what our city is about. This arena right here and this discussion, this is exactly what we need to do to advance any issue. It just happens today to be about whether or not city council should have an enlarged stipend or a pay. This is the way you do it. This is what we do in America. This is what we have come before us at city council, where the citizens come during citizens discussion and they get 3 minutes. Of course, we have to limit some time or to be able to listen to all the citizens, but this is the way we get issues identified and we start talking about them, and we ask the really hard questions about these particular issues. Some issues may not go forward. This may not go forward. I personally would like to see this go forward for the future council members to get some elevated stipend or pay beyond the $6,250, which has been that way for a long time. So that's what I want to, that's one of the reasons I wanted to participate today, is to say that these are the types of engagements that we need to do. We must do these to advance our city on whatever issue it is. In this case, city pay.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Leigh.
So I like Randy. I mean, I think that, communication, dialogue, those are the healthy ways to run, governance in a small community. We are a small community trying to grow up and become a big community. We have a lot of issues to deal with. Gosh, I can't think of an issue that the last 6 months where there haven't been real strong argumentation on both sides. And, you could take a position on either side and probably flip a coin and probably we're going to be okay no matter which way the outcome goes. But, I think the conversation is the really important part. And it's through the conversation that everything gets, vetted, hopefully in the light of day, so everybody understands the issues. I mean, I'm thinking of one right now, which is the tall building downtown. You mention that and, people's heads explode, right? And I think that they're going to have a tall building downtown. I hate to break the news to everybody, but I'm pretty sure you're going to have one. But, whatever the issue is, and I think the dialogue is healthy because it makes your city and your community healthy. Because, Shanita, you and I may disagree or agree on a lot of issues. Because I've been watching your head bob up and down when I've said stuff today, and I'm going to guess we need to have a cup of coffee. But it's when you run for office, the first question is, how are you going to build community, right? Randy, you've heard that. Richard, you've heard that. And the answer is you build community one conversation at a time. And this is a great start. Don't know where it's going to go. I wish you good luck and God bless you and Godspeed and all that stuff. I'm a doubting Thomas that it's going to catch fire, but I wish you the best. And I support an increase in the stipend. I'm not a big believer in a big salary. So that's, again, that's where I'm at. But great conversation to have. Be delighted to come back and participate again because I think this is a really important forum. And thank you for putting it on.
Thank you, Mr. Leigh. Appreciate it. Mr. Skorman.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. When Michelle Tellerico, she texted me a while ago, I can't remember, I think it's well over a month ago, saying that she couldn't really afford to run again. I'm not sure she's saying that publicly, but just her business, it wasn't easy for her to be able to run her business and be on city council. I know that feeling very well. And so I said, well, let me see if I can find some good people to run for District 3. I mean, I know lots of people that have been involved in the community, have different kinds of experience. It would be very good. And lots of different, sexes and, all the different, things that you can talk about. I called 8 people and they all said no. One was moving to another outside the district. The other 7 said, I can't afford it. It's just not the time in my life to be able to be on council. I thought they would all be good for different reasons. The people that you're talking about, Tim, that were, that maybe had a lot of experience in different ways and weren't going to be just real newbies, going into fresh to try and learn everything from scratch. And so it's just a reality we have to face. It's great that the people in the military retire a little bit earlier than the rest of us, and so they're able to run. And in many cases, like you, Randy, and many other people I've served with, I loved working with all the people in the retired military that I've worked with. It's the majority of the people that I've worked with, mostly men too, by the way. But having said that, it's gonna, unless this gets solved in one way or another, it's just going to be the same. And then the other, part that we're not talking about is the elephant in the room. So yes, Colorado Springs is, I think it's close to 500,000 now. I know you keep saying 500 or 480 or whatever it is, but we are the fastest growing city in the state, the fastest growing county in the state. We have the largest wildland urban interface of any city in the country, the most wildfire risk. We have an economy that could be fragile. I'm not clear that Fort Carson is going to survive for decades and decades because it really is about training infantry to fight wars that we're not fighting anymore. Now, Air Force, Space Command may move when Trump takes office. So that'll be some jobs lost. But, I think Air Force is going to be solid here. But, you just never know. Think about a wildfire in a mountain backdrop and losing the 20 to 25 million tourists that we get a year. I mean, the economy is going to be more fragile than people think. And then you happen to have a city that has a lot of geography. We're talking about just right now with tall buildings. We've been building, out instead of up, which I think is a good thing myself. I like the view shed, and it's a lot of what we market for businesses to move here and what people who live here love. But what's it going to be like when we're 750,000 people? And then what is this same city council that's volunteer going to have all that responsibility? Not maybe a police force of 800 people, but a police force of 1,500 people. Maybe not a budget of $2 million a year, maybe $2 billion a year. It may be, or 1.5 billion. You add all the enterprises, and it might be 5 billion a year. Utilities is definitely going to grow, and so here we are. Let's just keep it volunteer. Let's not have it be too much. Let's not have it be something that most people can afford to do. And the cost of living is much more than it used to be, by the way. When I first got elected to council, you could buy a house for $150,000. Don't think that's possible these days. So I'm just being the devil's advocate here. We are going to get bigger unless we have a disaster or a recession or something that I'm not thinking about.
Well, and the number that I give you is based off of the city redistricting. The city did their redistricting in 2024. They do that every 4 years, right? 25 precincts changed. And Sarah Johnson's estimated number based off from the 2020 census to the 2023 estimate is that 488. And I did have someone comment about the statistics that we talked about earlier. I will be sharing that on your screen in just a moment so you can kind of see those on the comparisons of where our city is at 6,250 compared with similar sized cities in regards to that. And one of the other things that we talked about, this is not about city council pay in redistricting, is, as it stands, each city council member the district members, you represent, if I remember, about 85,000.
88,000.
Yes, so 85 to 88,000 on average constituents. And I deal with my city council members at large and just regular, my district people. And when I call my at large person, he says, have you told your district rep? So knowing that we have 9 district members, and 6 of those, 9 members, 6 district, 3 at large, is that effective, efficient government with regards to, I hear 40 to 50 hours, and you can't do constituent services effectively either. And that is part of the job when I think about it. So know that is another discussion for another day, but I'm going to share my screen. If anybody has any other last minute comments, please put those in the chat. We've just got a few more minutes as we're wrapping up. I do want to share real quick so you guys can see those comparisons as well from what I had and where we got our information. So that should be on your screen for you. Again, let me just say thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you so much for being here today, and all of you for participating. It is, again, pretty dry conversation that we're doing. I very lovingly call myself a geek when it comes to kind of this stuff, and it's for the betterment of our people. And when I hear a former council member say, well, I was against it, and I was against it because it didn't really affect me. I was retired. I didn't need it. And now he's for it. That is a win, because that person is now looking at the whole and our community as it's for the betterment of our community and not just for himself. So do know that we're here for the betterment of our community as a league. I am going to promote our largest fundraiser is Love the League 2025. It is February 16th from 1 to 4. We are honoring 9 amazing women. It's a big party, basically. So if you want to please come, tickets are the least expensive you will ever find. $45 right now for a fundraiser for a nonprofit is unheard of. After February 1st, they do go up to $60, but we've got people like Sally Clark, Chief Jamie McConaughey, Rochelle Kimbrell, the first Air Force African-American fighter pilot. She's got like 1,500 hours, combat hours. It's crazy. Angie Stevens is on this call. She's Colorado Springs NAACP. She's one of our honorees as well. I know I'm missing Beth Alessio. Oh my goodness, I'm missing a few, but go to our website, please, lwvppr.org. Again, we are here as nonpartisan. We're not here for gotcha questions or anything. I hope our panelists were happy with the way that the discussion went today. I so appreciate all of you. So Thank you very much. We're going to kind of wrap it up. But again, until next time, we'll have another conversation. And of course, those candidate forums. But check out our website for all of that good stuff. And please become a member, right? We need more members. We need you to be active. So we encourage that conversation. I would love to sit in on with Tim and Chanita on a conversation too. That would be great. So again, thank you all, everybody. You guys have a great afternoon. Stay warm, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Appreciate you all.